The Zilani Confederation's capital world was dying. Massive explosions lit up the night sky as the hegemony fleet pounded their cities into dust. Commander Veltar stood on the bridge of his command ship, watching his people's last hope slip. Away with each passing minute, the hegemony had come without warning 3 days ago. Their black ships appeared like a plague across the stars, demanding complete surrender or total destruction. The Zilani had tried to fight back, but their peaceful society was no match for the war machine that had conquered half the galaxy. "Sir, we've lost the outer ring," his aide reported, her tentacles shaking with terror. The defensive stations that had protected their world for centuries were now nothing but glowing debris floating in space. Veltar closed his eyes and made a decision that would change everything. Deep in the Zilani archives, buried beneath layers of dust and forgotten history, lay something they had never understood. An ancient artifact discovered decades ago in the ruins of a dead civilization on the galaxy's edge. The crystalline beacon was beautiful in its simplicity. Strange symbols covered its surface, written in a language no scholar could translate. But some things needed no translation. The universal distress signals carved into its base were clear to anyone who had ever faced extinction. "Bring me the artifact," Veltar ordered. His crew looked at him like he had lost his mind. They were scientists and explorers, not warriors. They believed in logic and reason, not desperate gambles with mysterious alien technology. "Commander, we don't know what it does," his science officer warned. "It could be a weapon. It could destroy what's left of our fleet." Veltar looked out at the burning cities below. "We're already destroyed. At least this gives us a chance." The beacon felt warm in his hands, almost alive. For a moment he hesitated. Every instinct told him this was madness. But then another explosion rocked their ship, and he heard the screams of his people echoing through the comm system. "Activate it," he whispered. The beacon pulsed once with brilliant light, brighter than their dying sun. Energy coursed through its crystal structure, following patterns older than memory. Then it went dark and silent, as if nothing had happened at all. "Was that it?" someone asked. "Did it work?" Nobody knew. The hegemony ships continued their attack, unaware that anything had changed. More cities fell. More lives were lost. Zilani fleet scattered like leaves in a hurricane, unable to mount any real resistance. Hours passed. Veltar began to think they had gambled everything on a broken piece of ancient junk. His people were dying, and he had wasted their final moments on false hope. Then the sensors started screaming. "Commander," the communications officer's voice cracked with disbelief. "The long-range sensors are detecting massive energy signatures. They're coming from the galactic rim." Veltar rushed to the display screen. What he saw there made his blood run cold. Dozens of massive objects were racing toward their system at impossible speeds. They moved faster than anything in recorded galactic history, their energy readings off every scale. "How many ships?" he asked. "I don't know, sir. The computer can't process the readings. Whatever they are, they're huge. Bigger than anything the hegemony has." Zilani crew watched in stunned silence as their sensors tracked the approaching fleet. In just 6 hours, these mysterious ships had traveled a distance that should have taken weeks. The beacon had worked, but what exactly had they summoned from the darkness between stars? The unknown fleet was still hours away, but already the hegemony forces were detecting them. Enemy communications buzzed with confusion and growing alarm. Their conquest was about to become something very different. Veltar gripped the silent beacon tighter. Whoever was coming, they were about to learn what happened when you threatened a species under the protection of something far more dangerous than they could imagine. Captain Jake Morrison felt the familiar vibration of the ship's hull as the UES Retribution dropped out of hyperspace. Around him, 300 human warships materialized from the void, like ghosts returning from the dead. Scars of countless battles, fought in the darkness beyond known space. The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency, their faces hard and weathered. These weren't the fresh-faced academy graduates you'd find on exploration vessels. These were veterans who had spent decades fighting in the outer colonies, where survival meant being meaner and tougher than anything the universe could throw at you. Long-range sensors confirm hegemony positions, reported Lieutenant Williams, his fingers dancing across the tactical display. They've got the Zilani homeworld surrounded. Looks like they're in the middle of a full orbital bombardment. Morrison nodded grimly. He'd seen this pattern before. The hegemony liked to make examples of species that refused to surrender. They'd pound civilian targets until the defenders broke, then move in to claim whatever was left. Open a channel. To the Zilani command ship, he ordered. The communications officer worked quickly, cutting through the interference from the ongoing battle. Channel open, sir. Zilani vessel. This is the human deep space fleet, Morrison transmitted, his voice carrying across the void. We received your beacon. Static filled the bridge for several long seconds. Then a confused alien voice crackled. Through the speakers, speaking in heavily accented but clear English, humans? But your species was thought extinct? The galactic records show your homeworld was destroyed centuries ago. Morrison exchanged glances with his crew. The galaxy thought they were dead. Good, that had been the plan all along. Not extinct, he replied, his tone darker than the space. Around them, just waiting. The truth was more complicated than that. Humans had tried to join the galactic community once, back when they still believed in peace and cooperation. That experiment had ended in betrayal, war, and the near destruction of Earth itself. The survivors had fled to the Rimworld, swearing never again to trust in the goodness of alien civilizations. For 3 centuries, humanity had built in secret. They had colonized dead worlds, fought pirates, and worse things in the darkness, and learned hard lessons about survival. While the galaxy enjoyed its golden age of peace, humans had been preparing for the day when that peace would inevitably shatter. Admiral Lisa Bennett's voice suddenly cut across the fleet communications channel, sharp and commanding. Every human ship in the Armada could hear her words. All ships. This is Admiral Bennett. Form up on battle formation Theta. The hegemony just picked a fight with the wrong species. Morrison watched his tactical display as 300 warships moved into position with mechanical precision. No confusion, no hesitation. They'd drilled this formation 1,000 times in the dead systems where humanity made its new home. The hegemony fleet was massive, easily twice their number. But Morrison had learned long ago that numbers weren't everything. The aliens fought according to rules, following predictable patterns that had worked for them across dozens of conquered worlds. Humans didn't follow rules. They did whatever it took to win. Sir, we're receiving multiple transmissions from hegemony command ships, reported the communications officer. They're demanding we identify ourselves and state our intentions. Morrison almost smiled at that. The hegemony still thought this was going to be a polite conversation between civilized species. They had no idea what was about to hit them. No response, he ordered. Let them wonder. On the tactical display, red icons showed hegemony ships. Beginning to break off from their bombardment of the Zilani world, they were forming up into standard battle lines, probably expecting a conventional engagement. Morrison looked out at the stars, remembering all the battles that had brought them. To this moment, all the colonies that had burned, all the friends who had died learning how to fight in a universe that showed no mercy to the weak. The hegemony thought they were conquerors. They were about to learn the difference between conquest and survival. Ships, Morrison announced. Show them what humans do to bullies. Colonel Mike Davis stood in the war room aboard the flagship, studying holographic displays that showed every detail of the hegemony fleet. His weathered face remained expressionless as data streams flowed past him, but his mind was working like a predator sizing up its prey. The enemy formation was textbook perfect. Massive dreadnoughts in the center, cruisers forming protective screens, and fighter squadrons arranged in neat geometric patterns. It looked impressive, intimidating even, but Davis had spent 40 years learning to see past the surface. They fight like they're playing a game, he told his staff, pointing at the enemy positions. Clean formations, predictable movements. Everything has to be honorable and by the rules. Lieutenant Amy Foster, his intelligence officer, pulled up comparison charts on the tactical display. She'd been analyzing galactic military doctrine for months, preparing for this day. According to our data, sir, Standard galactic warfare follows strict protocols. Ships engage at maximum range with energy weapons. Boarding actions are considered barbaric. They actually have rules against targeting certain ship sections. Davis almost laughed. Rules in warfare. The galaxy had grown soft during its centuries of peace, turning war into some kind of gentleman's sport with regulations and codes of conduct. "Show me what we've got," he ordered. Foster's fingers danced across her console, bringing up the human arsenal. Railguns capable of punching through any known shielding. Kinetic torpedoes that moved too fast for point defense systems. EMP warheads designed to fry enemy electronics. And that was just the conventional stuff. "Our Marines are trained for void combat, sir. Full environmental suits, mag-boot assault tactics, close quarters fighting in zero atmosphere. We've got boarding pods that can punch through hull armor like paper." Davis nodded approvingly. Humans had learned to fight in environments that would kill most galactic species instantly. While aliens needed pressurized corridors and artificial gravity, human soldiers could operate in the cold vacuum of space itself. "What about psychological warfare?" he asked. Foster pulled up another file, this one marked with security warnings. "Full-spectrum psychological operations, sir. Everything from jamming their communications with horror sounds to broadcasting fake surrender messages. We've got programs designed to break enemy morale in under 30 minutes. The techniques had been developed during humanity's darkest period, when they'd fought desperate wars against impossible odds in the Rim territories. They'd learned that breaking an enemy's will to fight was often more effective than destroying. Their ships, Sergeant Tom Wilson, burst into the war room, his face flushed with excitement. "Sir, you need to hear this. The hegemony is broadcasting surrender demands to our entire fleet." Davis raised an eyebrow. "Surrender demands?" "Yes, sir. They're offering a safe passage out of the system if we withdraw immediately. They say they don't want to destroy such a primitive species unnecessarily." The colonel's staff exchanged glances. A few of the younger officers looked insulted, but Davis just smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. "Let them broadcast whatever they want," he said calmly. "Record everything. We'll use their own words against them later." Through intercepted communications, Davis could hear hegemony commanders discussing the human fleet with casual dismissal. They called humans Deathworlders, like it was an insult. Primitive beings who had somehow stumbled onto faster-than-light travel. One alien admiral was actually laughing as he described the human ships as outdated scrap metal held together with hope and stupidity. Another suggested they might keep a few humans alive as curiosities for their victory parade. Davis listened to it all with professional interest. Enemy overconfidence was a weapon he could use. Sir Foster said quietly. "They're treating this like target practice. They think we're going to line up and trade shots with them at long range." "Of course they do," Davis replied. "That's how civilized species fight wars. Stand far apart, shoot energy beams at each other until someone's shields fail, then accept. Surrender with dignity." He turned to face his staff, and they could see something dangerous in his eyes. Something that spoke of battles fought in asteroid fields and space stations, where survival meant being willing to do things that would give civilized beings nightmares. "They have no idea what they're dealing with," he continued. "We're not going to play by their rules. We're going to fight like humans." The hegemony had conquered dozens of worlds using their standard tactics. They'd never faced an enemy that fought dirty, that treated war as survival rather than sport. That was about to change. The attack began at 0300 hours, ship time, when most species would be resting. But humans had learned long ago that survival didn't follow convenient schedules. The hegemony fleet waited in perfect formation, expecting the humans to charge forward in a glorious battle line. Their commanders probably imagined speeches about honor and duty, followed by a clean exchange of fire at respectful distances. They were about to learn that humans didn't believe in fair fights, Commander. Lisa Parker's stealth frigates had been moving for hours, invisible ghosts sliding through the darkness. Her ships were painted black as space itself, their hulls coated with materials that absorbed sensor sweeps like hungry shadows. "Target acquired," whispered her weapons officer. "Hegemony supply convoy, 3 vessels, minimal escort." Parker smiled coldly. While the enemy admirals posed with their massive warships, she was cutting their lifelines. No fuel, no ammunition, no spare parts. Even the mightiest dreadnought became scrap metal when it couldn't fight. "Fire," she ordered. Railgun slugs, moving at a significant fraction of light speed, tore through the convoy ships before their crews even knew they were under attack. The hegemony had grown used to energy shields that could deflect laser blasts and plasma bolts. They had no defense against solid metal traveling fast enough to punch through a planet. Across the system, similar attacks were happening simultaneously. Repair ships vanished in silent explosions. Communication relays went dark. Medical vessels carrying wounded from the Zilani bombardment simply disappeared, leaving behind only expanding clouds of debris. The hegemony commanders were still trying to figure out what was happening when Major Ryan Brooks made his move. His assault shuttles didn't look like much compared to the sleek fighters used by galactic militaries. They were ugly functional boxes designed for one purpose: getting Marines from point A to point B alive. Their hulls were scarred from countless boarding actions in the rim worlds. Their pirates and worse things lurked in the darkness. "Bridge in 30 seconds, Brooks announced to his team over the comm. His Marines checked their weapons one final time. The familiar weight of kinetic rifles reassuring in the artificial gravity, the shuttle slammed into the hegemony flagship's hull with controlled violence, its cutting torch boring through armor plating like it was tissue paper. Emergency alarms screamed throughout the alien ship as atmosphere vented into space. "Hull breach on Deck 7. Came the panicked voice of a hegemony officer. "Emergency teams to Deck 7. But there were no emergency teams trained for this kind of assault. The hegemony fought wars in space, ship against ship, at civilized distances. The idea of enemy soldiers actually boarding their vessels was something from primitive history books. Brooks, his Marines poured through the breach. In full environmental suits, their mag boots clanging against metal decking. The hegemony crew they encountered were gasping and choking in the thin atmosphere, their bodies unable to function in the vacuum that humans treated like a minor inconvenience. "Secure the bridge," Brooks ordered, his voice calm despite the chaos. Around him, watch for pressure doors. These aliens can't breathe vacuum, so they'll try to seal us out. While the boarding action created havoc, Tech Sergeant Kevin Nash was fighting a different kind of war. His cyber warfare suite had been analyzing hegemony computer systems for hours, looking for weaknesses in their supposedly impenetrable networks. "Their AI is too smart for its own good," Nash reported to Captain Morrison. "It follows logical patterns, makes optimal decisions. It's very predictable." Human computer systems had learned to be paranoid and chaotic, shaped by centuries of fighting AI rebellions and cyber warfare. The hegemony's clean, efficient networks were like glass houses to someone who knew where to throw stones. Nash's programs slipped into enemy systems like viruses. But instead of destroying data, they fed false information. Sensor displays showed phantom human ships where none existed. Navigation computers received corrupted coordinates. Weapon systems locked onto their own escort vessels. Within minutes, the hegemony fleet was firing on itself, their perfect formations dissolving into confused clusters of ships, trying to avoid accidentally destroying their allies. "Sir, the enemy flagship is requesting immediate ceasefire," reported Morrison's communications officer, proclaiming their systems have been compromised. Morrison watched the tactical display as the mighty hegemony armada fell apart like a house of cards. Ships drifted helplessly with dead engines. Others spun out of control, their crews evacuating in life pods. The few vessels still capable of fighting were too busy rescuing survivors to pose any threat. 72 hours earlier, the hegemony had commanded one of the most powerful fleets in galactic history. Now, they were begging for mercy from the primitive Deathworlders they had dismissed so casually. The humans had won without fighting a single honorable battle. Admiral Lisa Bennett walked slowly across the bridge of the captured hegemony flagship, her boots echoing in the sudden silence. The massive command center, once filled with the arrogant voices of alien conquerors, now held only the quiet hum of human-controlled systems. The hegemony leadership stood before her in defeat, their proud uniforms torn and stained. These were the beings who had terrorized half the galaxy, who had burned worlds and enslaved entire civilizations. Now they couldn't even meet her eyes. General Alex Turner stood at attention beside the prisoners, his combat armor still bearing scorch marks from the boarding action. He had personally led the assault that captured this ship, fighting through corridors filled with desperate defenders, who had never imagined their mighty fortress could be breached. High Commander Zethkar of the Hegemony Fleet, Bennett said, quietly reading from a datapad. 17 conquered worlds. 40 billion civilian casualties. 300 years of galactic terror. The alien commander finally looked up, his multiple eyes filled with something humans rarely saw in their enemies, genuine fear. You wanted to know what humans are capable of, Bennett continued, her voice barely above a whisper. Now you know. The truth was written across the tactical displays surrounding them. In less than 72 hours, the human fleet had dismantled one of the most powerful military forces in galactic history. Not through superior numbers or advanced technology, but through sheer ruthless efficiency. They had fought like humans. Always fought, without mercy, without rules, without the luxury of honor that peaceful civilizations could afford. Dr. Rachel Green approached with her xenobiology report, her scientific mind still processing what they had accomplished. She had studied alien species for decades, but even she was surprised by what the data revealed. Admiral, I've completed my analysis of the engagement, she reported, her voice filled with professional fascination. The hegemony forces followed. Predictable patterns based on their biology and culture. They're herd animals, essentially. They rely on overwhelming numbers and coordinated group tactics. Bennett nodded, understanding the implications. And humans. Humans aren't just another. Species Green continued, her eyes bright with discovery. We're apex persistence predators who turned warfare into an art form. We evolved to hunt prey by following them until they collapsed from exhaustion. We never give up, and we learn from every encounter. The captured hegemony officers listened to this exchange with growing horror. They had dismissed humans as primitive Deathworlders, assuming that advanced technology would overcome any natural advantages. They had been catastrophically wrong. What happens now? Asked Commander Zethkar, his voice trembling. Will you execute? Us? Destroy our worlds in revenge? Bennett considered the question carefully. Around her, the bridge crew waited for her decision. These were soldiers who had seen too much war, who had fought in the darkness between stars for longer than most civilizations had existed. No, she said finally. We're not conquerors. We're protectors. The alien looked confused. I don't understand. You wouldn't, Bennett replied. Your species takes what it wants through force. Humans protect what they care about through force. There's a difference. Captain Jake Morrison appeared on the main view screen from his own ship, the battle damage to his bridge clearly visible behind him. Admiral, the Zalani government is requesting a formal meeting. They want to thank us for our intervention. Bennett nodded. Schedule it. And Morrison, start preparing our long-range communication arrays. It's time to let the galaxy know that humanity is back. Through the viewports, the rescued Zalani homeworld gleamed like a blue jewel against the stars. Cities that had been burning just days before were now safe, their people free to rebuild their lives. But the real change wasn't visible from space. Word of the human victory was already spreading through galactic communication networks. Species that had cowered before the hegemony for centuries were beginning to hope again. Morrison looked out at the stars from his own bridge, knowing that everything had changed. Humanity's long exile in the rim worlds was over. They had returned to the galaxy, not as the naive explorers they had once been, but as something far more dangerous. Experienced survivors who had learned that sometimes violence was the only answer. To violence, the sleeping giants had awakened, and they were here to stay. Not to conquer, but to ensure that no species would ever again face extinction alone. They would be the guardians that the galaxy had never known it needed, and that made them more terrifying than any empire could imagine. In the depths of space, human fleets began moving toward other systems where the strong preyed upon the weak. The age of unchallenged tyranny was ending. The humans had come home.